Hello, everybody. This is Gary. Today is December 4th, 2019. It's 12:04 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the United States in Rochester, New York. And this is my coping with schizophrenia vlog entry for today. Today, I wanted to do a video on artificial intelligence. I was watching a PBS documentary on YouTube yesterday. I forget the exact date that it was made. Um, But it was about artificial intelligence and the dangers that come with creating machines that may be able to think for us or even achieve consciousness and self awareness. In a sense, become alive, be aware of their own existence, and be able to think on their own independently of human beings. Um, Part of the advancement in artificial technology is based on mimicking what the human nervous system does, the brain, in creating artificial intelligence that's modeled after the human brain and the nervous system of the human being, and it will be an artificial representation of how uh, the human brain and mind works. The thing that I found ironic is that they were talking about all kinds of ways of using artificial intelligence. China is using it to increase the power of a police state. It's a dictatorship. Of course, China was never a democracy, but recently the president of China changed the constitution where he's going to be president for life, so he's consolidated all his power. Um, and that power is also going to be extended by using artificial intelligence in millions and millions of cameras throughout China to keep an eye on the Chinese people and whether or not they're being disruptive or disloyal to the Chinese Communist Party regime. Um, Artificial intelligence can use face recognition software through cameras and computers on crowds that are in any given city in China. And these cameras will read their faces, identify who they are, what they're thinking, how they're behaving. Um, China has a new social credit system where, which is truly scary, part of their police state is when you gain points for behaving certain ways that are not disruptive to the Chinese government. And if you do anything that is disruptive, that's put on your social, uh, social file, your social standing, your social class, not necessarily based on money, but based on who's causing the Chinese government problems and who isn't. But, anyways, artificial intelligence can be used by the Chinese to have cameras and read your faces when you're just walking down the street. You could have cameras watching you if you break the law by simply jaywalking across an intersection, and that would reduce your credit score, or not your credit score, your social standing score in China. Um, it's kind of like a credit score, but far more invasive and far more powerful and dangerous. Um, but, anyways, the interesting thing I find about all this stuff with artificial intelligence is that if we ever do create a machine that can think for itself, that has achieved consciousness and self awareness, and maybe even has emotions, and it's able to run completely independently as a separate mind from humanity. If we achieve a machine, a computer, a robot that can do those things, what's that going to mean for the mentally ill people? I mean, we build an artificial human brain, artificial intelligence, but we still know so little about the human brain and people with mental illnesses and how their brains function. I have schizophrenia, my brain functions a certain way, and most scientists don't really know how it works. Nobody knows the cause of schizophrenia, at least not 100%. Science suggests that it's hereditary. I had two mentally ill people in my family, my mother and my sister. My mother died from alcoholism, my sister died by suicide. Um, and so you've got mentally ill people who are hearing voices, seeing things that aren't there, are paranoid. Um, In some rare cases, mentally ill people can become violent, not the vast majority of them. But the thing is, we understand so little about how any mental illness works, whether it's depression, schizophrenia, anxiety, post traumatic stress disorder. And what we do know about these things is limited in what we can do as far as treating them with medications, with psychotherapy. In a lot of ways, these things have been in use for decades. Psychiatric drugs started to be developed in the 1950s, and we've been using those since the 1950s. Of course, there's been many newer drugs coming out for psychosis and depression and anxiety and such. Um, but when we use medications to treat mental illness, it's a very imprecise way of treating a mental illness to take a drug or to have electroshock therapy, which I've done in my past, um, hoping for the best. It's almost a guessing game between the psychiatrist or the doctor and the patient who has psychiatric problems, trying to guess what might work, what might not work. For example, I was on Haldol. There was no guarantee that Haldol was going to work for my particular mental illness. Um, and it's a very much a guessing game to guess which medication would help which patient with which disorder that they have. I just find it very ironic that we're developing artificial intelligence based on the human nervous system, and we actually really don't know that much about the nervous system in terms of how the brains of mentally ill people work or how their environment changes their brains to suffer, say, for example, post traumatic stress disorder. Post traumatic stress disorder seems pretty straightforward. It usually happens under extremely violent conditions like war or being a rape victim. And trauma, obviously, those things are traumatic, and a person sort of internalizes that traumatic event, and they seem to live it over and over again consciously. Um, so we know what the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder are, and we know that outside trauma causes it, but we don't know exactly what's happening to the human brain when that trauma is being experienced and it comes back later in the form of post-traumatic stress disorder. And again, if you decide to treat, if you have post-traumatic stress disorder and you want to get treated, so you go see a psychotherapist. Well, which type of psychotherapy is going to work best? Are any of them going to work? Should you use medication for post-traumatic stress disorder? Um, if so, which ones? So the point I'm trying to make is that I hope that as we develop artificial intelligence over the next several years to a couple of decades, um, that it isn't just used for police states in China, and that people who are creating artificial intelligence use it to help find out what's going on inside the brain of mentally ill people. That kind of research is very lacking. Um, and I think anybody developing artificial intelligence should take some interest in mental illness and trying to decide how the human brain works and doing research on how the human brain works. Maybe an artificial intelligence will even be able to scan the brain better than human beings and help decide what's going on in the minds of mentally ill people. My making this video wasn't for a particular purpose other than to say that I find it fascinating that mental illness has been around, well, forever, and the medications used to treat it, electroshock treatment as well, have only been around for several decades, maybe about 100 years for some treatments. Um, but it's all hit and miss. It's all guessing games. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try to make the guess. I try to make the guess every time I take my medication, hoping that one medication that I'm on works and that it doesn't necessarily have to be replaced with another medication because the one I tried wasn't working. Um, I hope that people who are developing artificial intelligence will delve more into how the physical brain works, especially in mentally ill people. And is there any role for artificial intelligence in doing research on the human brain of the mentally ill, trying to understand it? Maybe it's a machine that we need to study the human brain that could take into account all the different factors of what's going on inside the brain and reach conclusions much quicker than a human researcher could. But in the end, if artificial intelligence reaches that ultimate plateau of being conscious and self-aware, um, and there's very little change in how we treat mental illness, I would just find that very ironic. And I hope that there's some role in artificial intelligence to help research and eventually treat the mentally ill. Like, comment, subscribe, and share.